Right, looking forward to this. We should make some good progress today. No procrastination. Coffee. Right, hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about neck pockets and hopefully get the neck of my guitar attached to the body. Before we even start, let's talk neck pocket types and break angles, because this is where people get really worried. I did myself, and frankly it seems like a bit of a minefield, and it's more something that you're better off just kind of feeling your way through with, I think, personally. The goal on any guitar is to make sure that when the guitar is complete and strung up, the strings which are running from the nut to the saddles on the bridge are parallel with the fretboard when viewed from the side. In other words, they're the same height around fret 1 as they are around fret 12 or anywhere down this end of the neck. It's okay for it to be a little bit higher depending on how you like your neck set up. To do this, all we're basically doing is making sure that the saddles on the bridge are at the right height to create a string angle which is parallel to that of the fretboard. Typically on a Fender style guitar, or most flat top type guitars, the neck is completely flat in relation to the top of the body, and you will generally have a bridge type which can be raised to the perfect height so that it can just create a string run straight along to the nut with the neck nice and parallel, and there's no break angle involved usually. All we need to do is know how far our bridge saddles are going to be off the body while they still have a couple of mil adjustment in either direction. And then we need to come along to the heel of our neck and look at it and go, right, well, if the strings are going to be a couple of mil at least above our end fret, how far would I need to sink the heel into the body in order to have that correct height where the strings are going to be nice and straight and true with the neck, with just a couple of mil clearance and a couple of mil adjustment in either direction. So I'm not going to run through it now because I'm not doing a Fender style guitar, but if we say that's 20 mil, then ultimately my neck is probably going to be so deep into the body that it's probably leaving the frets protruding by about 18 mil, something like that. If in doubt, if you're a little bit nervous, just try and hit it somewhere in the middle that your bridge has got plenty of adjustment to play either way. Where people start to get a little bit worried is when they have a guitar with a break angle, like a PRS or a Les Paul style guitar. Let's talk first about why they actually have a break angle. It's not really anything to do with the shape of the guitar itself, or even really the construction. It's because the bridge types traditionally used on those guitars, such as a Tune-o-matic, are very, very high. Once we have a bridge that's fairly high off the body, we can't reasonably mount the neck in such a way that we can just run the strings straight along parallel with the neck from that bridge, because the neck would effectively be standing out from the body the same kind of height as the bridge would be, and that won't do. So what we end up doing is tilting the neck back so that it begins to point towards the top of the bridge, and that has the effect of bringing the nut down in relation to the bridge and creates a slope, which I admit might be hard to visualize here because we haven't got strings on at the moment, but we will find that the strings will come down towards the neck the more we tilt it back. The bit people get worried about is how much do I actually need to tilt it back. I don't have my strings on there at the minute, so it becomes very difficult to actually determine how many degrees to tilt the neck back by. This is made worse on a Les Paul style neck pocket, or at least a traditional Les Paul style neck tenon, where the fretboard actually rests on the top of the body of the guitar, because that means you have to then go and plane the break angle into the actual top of the guitar in order to mount the neck correctly. And yeah, that can be a little bit of a headache, and there are ways and means to figure all of that out. But it's because of all those headaches that I recommend the best style of neck pocket to do, even if you are doing a Les Paul shaped guitar, is probably to do the PRS style neck pocket, which is, instead of having the sort of T-shaped tenon of a traditional Les Paul, you have a neck that just fits completely inside the neck pocket, because then you don't have to worry necessarily about planing angles into the top of the body, although we can do that. You just really need to worry about making the damn thing fit, and then you can get your neck angle right after that. So the way I'm choosing to do things is to basically just decide how far I want to get the neck into the body to make it look right, and then I can sand or plane the angle into the base of the heel to tilt my neck back to the appropriate angle so that it matches my bridge, so I don't have to kind of deal with two variables at once. So with all that said, I just need to know how far I want to get my neck into the body, which the answer is, well, up to about the bottom of the fretboard, simple as that, and I need to mark that depth on the end of the body. So you've probably noticed by now, or if you've been following this build since the start, we've already got the makings of a neck pocket here, so I want to walk you through the old footage of how I achieved that, because it did go quite well. So the first thing I did was to stick some masking tape down over the neck pocket area, because I was going to be using the super glue and masking tape trick to stick some wood down and make a makeshift router template for the neck pocket. I opted to line up my neck with the body using the center line, of course. The method you can use to do that, well, you can either do it by eye, you can use a laser, or I tried to do it in this instance using a thread, which seemed to go okay. It probably wasn't the easiest way to do it, to be honest, but it was the way that worked for me at the time. Once I had the neck in position, supported and lined up, I chose to draw around the heel of the neck, and that gave me a good visual as to where the neck pocket should be. I then effectively just took some scrap pieces of wood and glued them in place around that template, going very close right up to the lines and allowing it to set. Note that the pieces of wood that I used are actually far too small for this. I did manage it using this template in the end, but what you actually want is something that's going to protrude at least a couple of inches past the end of the neck pocket, and is at least on the sides a little bit wider than this as well, just to give you a stable base to rest the router on. As you can see, I chose to plane the tops of the pieces of wood just to make sure they were completely snag free before I laid into it with the router. Before taking the router to the neck pocket, I actually used a Forstner bit to remove most of the material from the pocket. You do have to do this, even if you don't use a Forstner bit, you have to do it by some method, because you should only be using the router bit to take the last couple of mil away from the outer edges of the neck pocket, not all of the material, otherwise you risk tearing out big chunks of wood, which you definitely don't want. Another trick that I would highly recommend, which is quite common, is to run some masking tape, or even 2 layers of masking tape, around the edge of the router pocket, and that will just give you a pocket which is a few microns smaller than your original template, which will hopefully make for an extra tight pocket, or even make it so that it needs a little bit of fettling before you can actually fit the neck into the pocket. It's much better to have a pocket that's ever slightly too small than to have one that's too big. Bear in mind that the router cutter type that I'm using has the bearing at the top when the router is face down. You also need to make sure it is of the correct length so that you can make that first cut to the appropriate depth, but also while keeping the bearing on the template. You may find that as you go down into the depth of the neck pocket that you actually need multiple different lengths of cutter, and you need to watch for the collet of the router accidentally clipping the top of your guitar if you actually wind it down too deep because your router cutter is not long enough. Because the pieces of wood that I used were a little bit too small once I'd made the first pass with my router, I actually decided to finish off the very outer ends of the pocket by hand with a chisel, because I didn't want to risk slipping with the router and completely messing it up. Then, because the router cutter itself is round, I actually had to square off the corners of the neck pocket to actually get the neck to fit in. If the end of my neck was rounded like most Fender necks are, I might not have to do that, assuming the radius matches up, but again, this just tends to be the simpler way to do things. Once that first pass is complete, I again test the neck in the body, and they do say that the ideal tightness should be tight enough that you get some resistance getting the neck in, and it should also be able to pick the body up slightly and then drop it. It's okay if you can actually sort of pick the whole thing up and it doesn't drop out, but what you don't want is it's so tight that you really actually struggle to remove the neck, because then it's going to be too tight to actually get enough glue into the joint. So as you can tell, that first pass has gone quite well, and normally the next thing to do would be to remove the template and then use the pocket that I've already cut as a template itself to go even deeper to the full depth of the neck pocket. Unfortunately, if there's one thing I keep doing wrong time and time again with this build, it's doing things in the wrong order, and unfortunately this happened to me again. For one reason or another, I ended up having to resand the end of my neck to remove some unwanted marks, and because of that I now have a neck pocket that is just ever so slightly too big. As you can see, I can wiggle the neck from side to side a little bit in it. Now the classic fix for that is to insert a veneer, or a veneer either side of the neck, in the neck pocket, and that will serve to close up the gap. It does mean that you might get a visible veneer if you look at the neck pocket itself from that angle. To be honest with you though, it doesn't usually tend to be that visible. But as I've only currently reached about half depth with my neck pocket, I figured it was better to fix it now than going full depth and then fixing it later. So here's the classic dilemma. It just so happens the amount of adjustment we need to get that neck pocket tight again is one veneer. One veneer will get me to the point where the neck pocket is pretty much perfect. If I was to just glue one veneer in, we're going to move the center line of the neck offset with the center line of the body by about a veneer's width. So what you really want to do is put one veneer on each side. If I put one veneer on each side as it is at the moment, the neck pocket's ever so slightly too tight, which I can of course adjust for. Both methods would be valid at the moment and both have their merits. As it stands, with standard bench clamps, I could quite easily get in and clamp up that veneer on one side, but then I would have to leave it overnight and do the other side. I would then have to come back and remark out my neck pocket and reroute it to get it the perfect width. There is a little bit of danger in doing that, because I could potentially end up with the veneer so thin that I'm basically creating a new glue joint on top of bare glue almost when I come to actually glue the neck in, and I don't really want to do that. So in this instance, I think I'm actually just going to go with the one veneer approach. So I've got my veneer with a healthy dose of glue. Now what I could do at this point is start trying to clamp it up. And to be honest, I'd like to know, I assume such a thing exists as a clamp that would actually go the other way and press against the other side. If such a thing does exist, people please do let me know in the comments below what it's called. But it just so happens, because my neck is a more or less perfect fit in there, I can just pretty much stick the neck in there and use that as a clamp. The only downside to that, of course, is I don't want to accidentally glue my neck in. So what I can do is wrap the end of the neck in cling film. I don't have any cling film to hand, so I'm just actually going to use a polythene bag, which hopefully should work just as well. Just slot that in there, nice and tight. That should act as a clamp. some of the excess there. If I wasn't going to do a little bit of further work on the body, I'd probably want to come in with some hot water and clean that glue up to avoid it affecting how it stains, but that is all going to be sanded back before we glue the neck in, so I'm not too worried. So we'll just leave that like it is overnight, and then we'll come back and continue the job of routing out the neck pocket. Okay, 24 hours later, let's see what we've got. Oh well, the neck didn't stick in. Yep, that's looking fine. Just need to take a sharp chisel, just trim off any excess. Don't think there really is any excess along the top, to be fair. Hardly any. I've got this piece down the side, which is going to be cutting cross grain, but it's nice and sharp, so that's fine. One thing I did notice when reviewing the footage is that the bottom of the neck pocket is not in line with the joint between the body and the cap, which suggests it might be slightly slanted. I've got a feeling I put that in when I ran my plane over the top of the neck pocket template. I don't think it's going to be a major problem. I'm hoping that if I rest my router on the top of the body as it is now, it should hopefully level out. At least the ruler on top there leads me to think that it will do. Although that said, my top isn't exactly flat by the looks of it. Yeah, so I think I'm okay resting on this portion of the body, but this other side is sloping away slightly, so that might be a problem. I'm going to just try and wing it for now. I'm going to set my router up and just actually try resting it mainly on this portion of the neck pocket, and I'm just going to try and take off a really tiny amount, maybe 1-2 millimeters from the entire base of the neck pocket, and I just want to see how that goes, see what it gives me, and see what the neck fits like after doing that run. Well, that seems to have gone okay. Hopefully you can see now that that line in the base of the neck pocket is much more level with the joint of the body, which is a good sign. You might have seen a little bit of wobble in the footage there. That's just because really this isn't really stable enough a base to be doing this on. I should have something more sort of floorboard sized really as a template, but never mind. If we just test fit the neck there, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty perfect where it needs to be. So I'm definitely happy to continue with that as it is for the moment. I could keep making passes with the router, but because I've not got a stable router base going on here, it's not a particularly safe operation, so I want to minimize that as much as possible. So I'm going to double check I've got the correct depth marked here on my neck pocket, and I'm going to take it over to the drill press and just hog out as much material as I possibly can before we continue with the routing. Uh-oh, looks like I've misjudged the weight relief on my interior cavity a little bit. Not to worry, I've got plenty of surface area contact there, it's not going to be a problem. We're getting down towards the stages now where we're going to be taking probably the final passes, so I just need to be really careful about getting it marked up to the depth that I want. I am going to be having the neck sat pretty damn low in the body. The fretboard's probably only going to be coming to, well, about level with the body, something like that, but I am planning on planing away the top maybe half a centimetre or so of the body, so it will look fine. So what we've just had there really is a lesson in how not to use a router to make a neck pocket. Resting the router on top of the guitar itself, because it's already slightly carved, was definitely a bad idea. I have gotten away with it, but if I bring the neck pocket closer to the camera and let it focus, you'll hopefully see that I've not managed to get that perfectly flat yet. It's too precarious. So I'm going to smooth that off, probably with a chisel. What I should have done was made a proper template similar to the one I originally was going to use, like this. And if I'd have put that over the top where the neck pocket was and fixed it down perfectly, that would have been the perfect surface to do the neck pocket on. I was just basically trying to save time and avoid cutting another template out. While we've got this though, I think I've already mentioned that I'm going to cut my angle into the bottom of the neck to tilt the neck back. You can do it in the neck pocket as well. If you wanted to do that, it's basically done by lifting the template up like this and putting a block of wood underneath and making sure it's all fixed down, obviously, and then you can route the angle, the break angle, into the bottom of the neck pocket. But anyway, we're nearly there. We have managed, despite it being a little bit bodgy as usual. So I'm now just going to take my chisel and start smoothing that off. Wenge, whatever you want to call it, it's probably the worst wood to be trying to do this with. Well, test fit of the neck. Seems pretty perfect to me. This is a very heavy body and I can just about, well, I can lift it up off the ground, but it's nice and tight in the socket there. Pretty much bang on perfect. But it's looking a good fit. I wouldn't say it's perfect. It's gonna work. That's the important thing. Next thing to do really is get the break angle in the neck. To do that, I need to know what my bridge height's going to be. So again, this is a point at which we could get a bit bogged down with exact measurement. I already have my approximate bridge position marked on the body. and I have my bridge. The bridge, by the time you've actually got the bridge pins underneath it, will actually probably be a couple of mil taller than that, and I want a couple of mil adjustment again on top of that. So the bridge is about 15-16 mil. We're going to be getting into the territory of about 20 mil worth of height by the time that's in position. I have a random piece of metal, which is actually the spanner for my router here, which is a good 3 or 4 mil thick. If I stick my bridge on top of that, that gives me an approximate bridge height where it's going to be once it's actually attached. Now notice I'm not getting bogged down in measuring things too much here at the moment. I'm just trying to get a good idea of whether my neck break angle needs adjustment. There is a slight angle already in the base of the heel, but not a lot, so I'm expecting that I'm going to have to angle it back a little bit more. If I rest this straight edge on the end of the fretboard and move it up towards the bridge, you can see at the moment it's aiming too low, so it is going to need to tilt backwards. If I pop this on top of the saddle, you can see what it would be like if we tried to put strings on there. I'm getting a nice wedge shaped gap there, but it's not too far off. So I'm literally just going to do the PRS method of adjustment, which is to take this out and rub the heel back and forth on a sanding surface. So just in case that wasn't clear, if I lay a straight edge on top of the fretboard there and rest it on the bridge at the other end, you should be able to see that there's only a tiny little gap at the end of the fretboard there when I'm resting on the bridge saddle. But that is with the bridge completely against the body of the guitar, so there's no further adjustment to be able to bring it down. If I pop my spanner back under the bridge again, which is just over 3 mil, and then try again, you can see that there's quite a gap now. Even if I lift it up to sort of string height, this gap here is now way too big. So what I need to do is just start sanding away at the heel of the neck, putting an angle into it, so that when I lift this up to about appropriate string height, it ends up being parallel with the fretboard in that position, and that will allow me to have some adjustment up and down if I need to set the guitar up differently in the future. First off, I do have a small confession to make. I did find the sanding was taking a little bit longer than I thought, so I got my number 4 plane involved. I simply just clamped the neck face down on the bench and ran the plane along the sole, putting downward pressure on the end where I wanted to create the slope. And after a while, we got there. So you can see now, if I put this straight edge on the fretboard, it is actually clearing the top of the saddle by a tiny amount now. If anything, I could possibly do with going back the other way a tiny little bit, but I won't bore you with that. It's good enough for now. Now I may have misled you slightly during this video. I think I did say at some point that I was thinking about gluing the neck in, but actually there's a few jobs to do first. The top one on the list is to actually route out the pickup pockets, but also because of the depth that the neck is now sunk into the body, I'm going to have to plane away the top of the body to put the break angle into the body, which I will do in the next video. But this one's getting a bit long, so we'll leave it there for today, and I will see you next time.